Welcome to Zen Mind Journey. Tonight you are invited to rest. Let the day dissolve. Let your breath soften. Let your thoughts drift like clouds beyond the mountains. In the space between stillness and sleep, you'll hear quiet stories from long ago. Stories of wandering monks, moonlit paths and silent truths. There is no rush here, no need to understand. Just listen and follow the sound of peace.
In a small village where the houses leaned gently with time and the paths between them were swept clean with care each morning, there lived an old woman known only as Grandmother June. She had no children, no husband, no family nearby. But she was never lonely. Her home was always open, the kettle was always warm, and her porch, shaded by persimmon trees, was rarely without the sound of someone sitting, telling stories, or simply watching the sky change colour. One crisp morning, just as the dew began to rise in mist from the grass, Grandmother June heard a knock. Not hurried, not loud, just a quiet tapping like the soft beak of a bird against a hollow gourd. She opened the door and found a stranger. Not young, not old, dressed in plain robes dusty from travel. He carried no pack, no sandals, only a cane of smooth black wood and eyes that held a sky full of silence. "May I come in?" he asked. Grandmother June studied him, felt no danger, only stillness. She stepped aside. "You may," she said, "but you must leave your name at the door." The guest smiled. "I have no name," he replied. She nodded, as if she'd expected nothing else. And so, without question, she welcomed him in. The guest stayed for one day, then two, then many more. He spoke little, a soft thank you at meals, a gentle nod in the morning, but most of his hours were spent sitting beneath the old persimmon tree, hands resting on his knees, eyes watching the wind move through branches. Grandmother June did not ask questions. She swept around him, set out tea without a word, and tended to her garden as if the silence between them were just another kind of music. But something in the house began to shift. The ticking of the old wall clock seemed slower. The birds that came to the porch lingered longer. Even the kettle, when it whistled, sounded less like a call, and more like a sigh. One evening, as the guest sat watching the moon rise, June brought him a small bowl of soup. She didn't ask if he was hungry. She just placed it beside him and sat down too. For a while they said nothing. Then she asked, "Are you waiting for something?" He turned to her, his face soft in the moonlight. "No," he said, "I'm listening for something." "And have you heard it yet?" she asked. He smiled. "Not with my ears." They watched the moon together. And in that moment, June felt as if the guest had brought no answers, but had cleared enough space for her own to rise. She didn't know what they were yet, only that they were coming. And that was enough. Word of the quiet guest spread through the village, not through gossip, but through stillness. Neighbours who visited June left her home slower, speaking in hushed tones as though they'd forgotten how to be loud. A carpenter who came to fix a creaking step paused halfway through the job to watch sunlight dance across the floorboards. A young mother who came to borrow herbs sat down without meaning to, and wept softly into her hands before saying a word. And the guest, he never interfered. He simply listened. To the floor beneath his feet, to the tea as it cooled, to the space between others' words. The villagers, one by one, began to visit for no reason at all. Some came with stories they hadn't told in years. Others came just to sit, and when they left, they carried something with them. Not advice, not answers, but a quietness that made the world feel a little wider. Jun began to notice small changes in herself. She cooked with more care, swept the porch slower, began speaking less, but somehow saying more. The wind seemed gentler, the nights felt deeper, even her dreams changed, now filled with wide open fields, silent temples, and voices that didn't need to speak to be heard. One afternoon she asked the guest, "Do you miss where you came from?" He shook his head. "I never left," he said. She looked at him, confused, but he only smiled. And in that smile she felt the edges of understanding begin to loosen, as if the answer was not meant to be caught, only felt in the still air after a breeze has passed. On the first morning of spring, just as the frost had begun to leave the window panes, Jun woke to silence. Not the gentle quiet she had grown used to, but a hollow kind. The mat beneath the persimmon tree was empty, the cane gone, the teacup clean and resting exactly where she always set it. She walked outside and searched the path. No footprints, no note, only the scent of plum blossoms carried lightly on the morning air. She stood for a long time, hands folded in her sleeves, waiting to feel sadness. But it didn't come. Instead, she felt a stillness stretching gently within her. Like a room she hadn't known existed was now open. The villagers noticed too. One by one they came by to ask, "Where did the guest go? Did he leave anything behind?" Jun would smile, set out tea and say, "Only what he didn't bring." They puzzled at that, but over time they understood. Because though the guest had no name, he left a silence that softened voices, a calm that made even arguments feel unnecessary. He had asked for nothing, yet everyone had given him something, their attention, their breath, their space, and in return he had left them with themselves, whole, unrushed, unspoken. That summer, a traveller passing through the village asked June if she remembered everyone who came to her door. She poured him tea and said, "Not with my mind, but with the space they leave behind." Then she looked towards the persimmon tree where the leaves had returned, new green trembling in the breeze. And for just a moment, she thought she saw the guest again, not in form, not in shadow, but in the way the wind paused just before the tree sighed.
And now, for the next story.
The Lantern Festival. In a small village nestled gently between rolling hills and the quiet bend of a slow-moving river, the night air was alive with soft anticipation. The eve of the Lantern Festival had come, a sacred night when the ordinary world seemed to shimmer, and the sky itself appeared to open like a deep, indigo blossom sprinkled with thousands of distant stars. The air was cool and fragrant, carrying the delicate perfume of blooming cherry blossoms mingled with the sweet, smoky tendrils of sandalwood incense burning quietly in the little shrines scattered along the village paths. Narrow streets lined with wooden houses whose shutters had been carefully opened glowed warmly with hundreds of paper lanterns. These lanterns, painted in gentle reds, soft golds and whispers of pale ivory, flickered tenderly in the evening breeze, casting dancing pools of amber light that played upon worn cobblestones and weathered door frames. The village was alive, yet hushed in reverence, as if all had been drawn together by some invisible thread, woven through centuries of shared stories and quiet celebrations. The faint murmur of whispered conversations, the gentle rustle of silk robes, and the distant chime of temple bells floated softly on the night air. Among the villagers was May, the elder storyteller whose voice was like a soothing stream flowing through the stillness. Children, wide-eyed and wrapped in soft shawls, gathered closely around the crackling communal fire. The flames flickered and spat sparks that rose like tiny, fleeting stars into the dark above. May's voice began to weave a tale, slow and deliberate, each word a smooth stone cast gently onto the surface of a calm pond. Her story spoke of a special lantern unlike any other, a lantern said to hold a light born not of flame or oil, but from the very heart of the night itself. This light was soft and steady, a quiet glow that could calm the most restless mind and soothe the deepest weariness. It was said to reside deep within the ancient forest beyond the village, hidden among the towering bamboo and moss-covered stones, where only those who had already found a calm peace within could glimpse it. The children listened closely, their faces lit by the flickering firelight and the warm glow of lanterns all around. May described how many seekers had ventured into the forest, drawn by the legend, only to find that the lantern's light did not shine outward for all to see. Instead, it revealed itself gently to those who carried the quiet flame inside, their own stillness, their own patience, and their own silent knowing. As the story unfolded, the villagers rose one by one, each holding a lantern carefully crafted by their own hands. With gentle reverence, they lit the wicks and released their lanterns into the evening sky. One by one, the lanterns lifted upward, like glowing blossoms drifting slowly on a dark sea. They rose higher and higher until their soft lights joined the stars above, weaving a tapestry of gentle radiance, stretching to infinity. The children's eyes followed the lanterns wide with wonder, their breaths shallow and soft. A warm calm settled over the gathering, a silent invitation to rest, to release, to be present. May's voice, now softer and almost a whisper, invited all to imagine the gentle light of their own inner lantern, the quiet presence within that could guide them through darkness without struggle or strain. She spoke of how this light was always there, waiting patiently, glowing steadily, even when the world outside felt uncertain or harsh. The night deepened, and the lanterns floated higher still, becoming tiny specks of hope against the vast velvet sky. The village held its breath in reverent stillness, wrapped in the embrace of the festival's peaceful mystery. Finally, as the last lantern disappeared into the infinite expanse, May's final words floated softly into the hearts of all who listened, like a gentle breeze over a still lake. What if the light you seek has already been glowing quietly within you all along? And so, beneath the endless sky and among the drifting lanterns, the village breathed in the calm, the mystery, and the deep, soothing peace of the night. Each soul, touched by the festival's gentle magic, carried that quiet light into their dreams, where it would burn softly through the night, steady, serene, and whole.
And now, for the next story.
In a quiet dojo nestled among whispering bamboo, there was a moment held sacred, the silence after the bow. It was not the bow itself, not the graceful bending of bodies, nor the soft sound of feet touching polished wood. It was the stillness that followed, a breath suspended, a space where time seemed to pause and the world became utterly present. The masters called it the meeting of hearts, the place where respect transcends form and becomes presence. Each day, students would enter the dojo, their minds busy with worry, their bodies ready for movement. But before the first step, they would bow, and then they would listen to the silence, to the space that holds both student and teacher. This silence was like a river, calm on the surface, but deep and flowing underneath. It carried the weight of centuries of practice, the breath of countless souls who had stood in the same spot, bowed in the same way, and let the silence teach them. One morning, a young student named Hana noticed the silence more than the bow. She felt it linger, a delicate thread connecting her to the master, to the room, and most of all, to herself. It was in this silence that she began to understand what the practice truly meant. She realized that the bow was not just a gesture, but a gateway, a moment to set aside distraction, to meet the present without judgment, a moment to open and receive. As Hana stood in that silence, she felt the tension in her shoulders soften like a leaf falling to earth. The noise in her mind began to fade, not all at once, but like waves gently retreating from a quiet shore. She could hear her own breath, slow and steady, the gentle beat of her heart, and the soft rustle of bamboo leaves outside the open window. The room was filled with light, golden and warm, casting soft shadows that danced like whispers against the wooden floor. Hana's eyes closed, and she felt herself expand beyond the body, beyond the dojo, to something vast and unending. The silence was not empty. It was full of stories unspoken, lessons not taught with words, and wisdom carried in the spaces between sounds. She understood then that the silence after the bow was a teacher itself, a reminder that respect is not just shown, but felt, not just given, but received, and that in this quiet moment, connection blooms, between bodies, between hearts, between all things. The next day, Hana arrived earlier than usual. The air was cool and crisp, tinged with the scent of rain-soaked earth and fresh bamboo shoots. She sat cross-legged in the corner, watching the room slowly fill. Other students arrived, some nervous, some confident, each carrying their own stories, their own busy thoughts. But when the master entered and the bow was made, the room fell into the same sacred silence. Hana noticed the faces change, muscles relaxing, eyes softening, breath deepening. The silence connected them all, like an invisible thread woven through the space. It was a moment without words, without instruction, a pause pregnant with possibility. And in that moment, she felt held. Days passed, and Hana found herself returning to the silence again and again. It was no longer just a pause, but a presence. A space where the noise of the world fell away like leaves in autumn. In the quiet, she could hear the soft rhythm of her own breath, the gentle beat of her heart, and the steady footsteps of those around her. She began to notice the small things, the way sunlight filtered through bamboo leaves, creating patterns on the floor that shifted with each passing cloud. The soft whisper of wind moving through the grove outside the dojo, the distant call of a bird, and the gentle rustle of fabric as students shifted in meditation. One afternoon, after a long practice, she sat beneath the bamboo grove near the dojo. The earth was cool beneath her hands, the scent of moss and fresh grass filled the air, the light was dappled and soft. and the world felt like a quiet breath held between heartbeats. Hana closed her eyes and listened. The silence was not empty. It was full of stories unspoken, lessons not taught with words, and wisdom carried in the spaces between sounds. She understood then that the silence after the bow was a teacher itself, a reminder that respect is not just shown, but felt, not just given, but received, and that in this quiet moment, connection blooms, between bodies, between hearts, between all things. Hana felt a gentle warmth spread through her chest, a kindness flowing outward, connecting her to the trees, the earth, and the soft sky above. It was as if the silence held a sacred space where all things could simply be. In the days that followed, Hana began to carry this silence with her outside the dojo, into the marketplace, into her home, into her conversations. She found that when she slowed, when she listened deeply, the world around her changed. People spoke more softly, smiled more often, and moments that once felt rushed became invitations to breathe. One morning, as she walked along a quiet path, she paused beneath a great cherry blossom tree. Petals drifted like pink snow around her, and she closed her eyes once more, feeling the quiet deepen. She realized that the silence after the bow was not only a practice, but a way of being, a way to carry peace within and share it without words. Hana returned to the dojo the next morning, her heart lighter, her mind quieter. She bowed deeply, more fully than before, and let the silence settle between her and the master. This time, the silence stretched gently, like a soft thread weaving them together. Her movements became slower, more deliberate, flowing with the rhythm of breath and presence. The lessons she had learned were no longer just about form, but about the spaces in between. She noticed how the pauses in movement held as much meaning as the actions themselves. After practice, she would sit beneath the bamboo again, feeling the whispers of leaves above her. She noticed how the wind moved not against the trees but through them, a dance of stillness and motion. She understood that true harmony comes not from forcing, but from yielding. Her days grew calmer, her steps lighter, her heart more open. Others began to notice the change in her, a quiet strength, a peace that spoke without words. Her teacher watched with gentle approval, knowing that Hana had begun to walk the path beyond technique. One evening, the master approached her and said softly, "The silence after the bow is not just a moment. It is a path. Walk it with care." Hana nodded, knowing this was only the beginning. She realized the silence was not empty, but full of life, full of connection, full of love. It was a seed planted deeply within her spirit, ready to grow and bloom in its own time. In the weeks that followed, Hana began to share this understanding quietly, gently. She taught younger students to bow and to sit with the silence after. She encouraged them to notice the space, the stillness that connects teacher and student, one soul to another. The dojo became softer, more alive. Laughter mingled with quiet breaths. The energy shifted from hurried practice to mindful presence. It was as if the very air had changed, and Hana, once a novice herself, now became a keeper of stillness, a guide to the path of quiet respect. In in the weeks and months that followed, Hana carried the silence with her. Into the streets, into her home, into every moment. She shared it quietly, without words or ceremony, but with a presence that touched those around her. Neighbours noticed the calm in her eyes. Friends felt the warmth of her listening. Even strangers paused when she walked by, as if the stillness she carried invited them to breathe deeper. At the dojo, she began teaching the younger students. Before each lesson, she guided them gently to bow, and then to rest in the silence after. She told them, "Respect lives here, not just in our actions, but in the quiet space between them." The dojo grew softer, more alive. The sound of laughter mingled with quiet breaths. The energy shifted from hurried practice to mindful presence. One evening, as the sun set behind the bamboo, Hana stood beside her master. Together they watched the light fade, and in that fading light she understood. The silence after the bow was not just a practice, it was a way of being, a ripple spreading from one heart to another, a gentle wave that touched everyone it met, a reminder that in stillness we find connection, in quiet we find love, and in presence we find peace. Long after Hana's footsteps had softened on the path, her lesson remained. Students who followed felt the whisper of silence held carefully in their own bows. The dojo, once a place of movement alone, became a sanctuary of stillness, where silence was not absence, but a presence full of life. And in that sacred space, the hearts of many met, in respect, in kindness, and in the shared rhythm of the silence after the bow.
And now, for the next story.
In a quiet temple nestled between two ridges where the moss grew thick and undisturbed, there lay a small rock garden. Not grand, not ornate, just a rectangle of sand, a handful of stones, and the slow rhythm of time passing through shadows. Each morning, an old monk named Ray would step into the garden barefoot, a wooden rake in hand. He would not speak. He would not sweep. He would listen, and then, with a long exhale, he would begin. His rake moved in slow, deliberate arcs, etching lines through the sand like ripples in a still pond. Around the stones, he circled, never touching them, only framing them with space. It was said Ray had tended the garden for 60 years, but no one ever asked him why. Because those who visited, those who stayed long enough to notice, began to hear something in the patterns he drew. Not a sound exactly, but a feeling, as if the garden, though still, was speaking, a whisper without breath, a voice made of sand. One evening, a young novice named Jun stood at the edge of the garden and asked Ray, "What are you listening for?" Ray paused, the rake resting gently in the sand. He turned to Jun, eyes soft with age. "Not for," he said. "With." Jun frowned. He did not understand. But something in the monk's stillness made him quiet his questions. He simply stood and watched as Ray returned to his raking. The lines flowed, the stones held their silence, and somewhere between the two, Jun began to hear something. He couldn't name it, but it brushed the edge of his thoughts like wind through tall grass. The next morning, just after the bell had echoed through the temple, Ray approached Jun as he finished sweeping the corridor. He handed the young novice the rake. Worn, simple, smoothed by years of quiet hands. Today, Ray said softly, the garden listens to you. Jun hesitated, but I don't know the patterns. Ray smiled. Neither do I. With that, he bowed and stepped aside. Jun entered the garden. His feet touched the cool sand. The early light stretched long shadows across the stones. He stood still, then began to rake. Straight lines, as he had seen Ray do, then curves, then spirals around the largest stone. But something felt wrong. The rake scratched too loudly. The lines felt forced. His hands tensed with the urge to make it look right. Ray, from the edge of the porch, said only, "You are trying to draw. Try to listen instead." Jun stopped. He closed his eyes. The wind brushed past his ear. A crow called from the distant trees. His own heartbeat, steady now, like footsteps on soft ground. He opened his eyes and looked at the garden. Not as a surface to change, but as something already speaking. He moved the rake again, this time slower, gentler, letting the stones shape his path. A curve here, a space there, a pause. The sound of the rake softened. The garden responded. Not with noise, but with ease. The lines no longer mattered. They would vanish with the breeze. What stayed was something deeper. When Jun stepped out of the sand, Ray took the rake and nodded. "You heard it." Jun said nothing, but his breath was different. He would never rake as Ray did, nor was he meant to. But the whisper, the one that lived between movement and stillness, had begun to speak to him too. Days passed, then weeks. The rhythm of the temple continued, bells, incense, chores, study. But something in June had slowed, softened. He found himself pausing more often, listening to small sounds. Broom bristles against wood, a leaf dropping into water, his own breath as it entered and left without needing permission. One morning, rain came. Not a storm, not a drizzle. A steady, patient fall that turned the world to silver. The monks remained indoors. The garden would not be raked today. But Jun stepped out anyway. He walked barefoot, the wooden porch cool beneath him. He carried no rake, only stillness. As he approached the garden, he noticed something. The sand was soaked, the lines from the day before erased. The stones gleamed under the rain, dark, grounded, unmoved. He sat at the edge of the garden, did nothing, and said nothing. And then he heard it, a whisper, not from the rain, not from the stones, from within. A knowing he could not name, a presence without form. The garden, even undone by water, still spoke, not with symbols, not with marks in the sand, but with presence, with the patience to remain even when all patterns have been washed away. Jun sat there for a long time, rain touching his robe, soaking through, but he did not move, because nothing was missing, nothing needed to be added. The silence was not empty, it was full, and it welcomed him. When the rain finally slowed and the sky brightened, Jun rose. He bowed to the garden and walked back inside, his heart as still as the stones. The next morning, Jun rose before the bell. The rain had passed, leaving behind a freshness that clung to every leaf and stone. He walked quietly to the garden. The sand was damp, untouched, open. Ray was already there, standing, still. In his hands the rake, but he did not move. He simply looked at the garden as if it were speaking still. Jun bowed. Ray returned the gesture. Then, without a word, he placed the rake in Jun's hands and stepped aside. Jun stood there for a long time. He did not begin right away. He waited until he felt the quiet return. Then he raked. Not to form something, not to impress, only to move with what was already there. The sand yielded easily. The stones accepted their silence. And between them, a whisper. Jun could not say what it meant, only that it felt like remembering something he had never been told. When he finished, Ray stepped forward. He did not inspect the patterns, he did not nod. Instead, he handed Jun a small object, a stone, smooth, plain, ordinary. "What is this for?" Jun asked. Ray looked at the garden, then at Jun. "To carry the whisper wherever you go." Jun closed his fingers around the stone. It was warm from Ray's hand, and somehow it felt full, not with weight, but with presence. That afternoon, Jun left the temple. He did not say goodbye. Nor did Ray. They only bowed as stillness bowed to stillness. In the years that followed, Jun became a teacher, but he spoke little and raked nothing. He carried the stone with him, not to show but to remember, and those who sat near him said they felt something odd. A quiet in the bones, a hush behind the noise, as if a garden, somewhere unseen, was drawing lines in soft sand, just for them.
And now, for the next story.
At the edge of the village, past the last row of plum trees, there was a small clearing where nothing much ever happened. The grass grew in quiet waves. The earth held few stones. Even the birds seemed to pass it by without singing. And then one spring, a man arrived with wood. He brought no cart, no tools, only a bundle of planks strapped to his back, and a look in his eyes that spoke of something not yet seen. He did not ask permission. He did not announce his purpose. He simply began building a bridge. But here's the thing, there was no river, no stream, no cliff, no gap to cross, just grass. He laid the planks with great care, tapping them into place with a smooth stone. Each day the bridge grew longer. Each night he sat quietly beside it, watching the sky change colours without ever looking away. By the 7th day, a small group had gathered from the village. Some watched in silence. Some laughed. Others began to whisper. "He's gone mad," one said. "There's nothing to cross here." "Maybe he's waiting for a river to come," another joked. But the man kept building, plank after plank, with slow, steady hands, until finally the bridge stood complete, 12 paces long, raised slightly above the grass, leading nowhere. And then he stopped, for days. No one crossed the bridge. Why would they? It began in grass and ended in grass. No road, no destination, just a quiet arc of wood in a place that had never needed one. Children came to play near it, but were warned not to climb. Elders walked past it slowly, squinting as though a purpose might reveal itself if stared at long enough. One morning, a monk from the hill temple arrived. He stood at one end of the bridge, hands folded behind his back, and said, "You've built something quite unusual." The man nodded. "Do you plan to move it somewhere?" "No," the builder replied. "It belongs here." The monk smiled politely, waiting for more. When no explanation came, he asked again, "But what is it for?" The builder looked at the bridge, then at the grass, then at the monk. "To cross," he said. "But to cross to where?" The builder paused, then answered, "That depends on who you are when you step on, and who you are when you step off." The monk didn't reply. He stood still for a long while, then bowed and walked away without ever placing a foot on the wood. That night, the man lit a single lantern at the base of the bridge and sat beside it as he always did. He did not guard it, he did not wait. He simply sat. As the wind moved gently through the tall grass and the moon rose like a question, no longer needing an answer. It happened quietly, as most true things do. An old woman came just after sunrise, carrying a small bundle of herbs wrapped in cloth. She did not speak. She did not hesitate. She stepped onto the bridge as though she'd always known it was there. The wood creaked gently under her feet. The breeze moved with her. And though she crossed in no more than 12 paces, something shifted. She stood at the other end for a long time, then sat down in the grass, facing back toward the bridge, as though looking at something she'd just left behind. That afternoon, a boy came running, barefoot, breathless. He stopped at the foot of the bridge, looked around, and crossed with a single joyful leap. When he reached the far side, he didn't run again. He walked, slower, lighter, as though something had been left behind that didn't need to be carried anymore. And so it began, one by one, a traveller, a widow, a farmer with his hat in his hands. They crossed the bridge not to go somewhere new, but to meet something already waiting. No toll, no signs, no words, just the sound of footsteps on warm wood and the silence that followed each one. And the builder, he remained where he always was, at the edge, beside the lantern, watching without asking, listening without speaking, smiling sometimes, but only when the wind moved just right through the grain of the wood. Seasons passed, the grass grew tall, then yellowed, then bowed beneath the snow, and still the bridge remained. It aged without aging. It creaked but did not crack. It stood but did not shift. People still came, not every day, but often enough that the wood grew smooth under the quiet rhythm of footsteps. Sometimes they crossed alone, sometimes in pairs, sometimes in silence. They met eyes with others midway across and nodded as if passing through a shared dream. The villagers no longer questioned its purpose. Children no longer laughed. Even the birds began to pause on its railings, resting their wings before continuing their invisible paths. And the builder, one day, he was simply gone. No goodbye, no note, just the empty lantern at the bridge's foot and the faint scent of pine smoke in the air. Some said he had gone to find a river worthy of his next bridge. Others believed he had walked across his own creation and never returned. But the bridge, it stayed. Through wind, through frost, through everything, and those who crossed it never forgot the feeling, though few could name it. Not peace, not healing, not understanding. Something quieter than all of that, like the weight of a question that no longer needs answering. And so it was, that a bridge which led nowhere began to take the people exactly where they needed to go.
And now, for the next story.
The mountain path. High in the quiet folds of the ancient mountains, where the air is crisp and thin and clouds drift like drifting dreams, there is a narrow path carved gently into the hillside. This path, woven from earth and stone, is worn smooth by the footsteps of countless wanderers, seeking not only a journey outward, but a journey inward, a quiet pilgrimage through stillness and reflection. One soft morning, as the delicate light of dawn spilled over the jagged peaks like liquid gold, a solitary traveller set out along this mountain path. Cloaked in muted earth tones, he moved slowly, each step measured and mindful, as though listening to the silent song of the stones beneath his feet. Around him, the world was hushed. Towering pines stood sentinel, their needles whispering ancient secrets to the gentle breeze. The scent of damp moss, wild herbs and cold mountain air hung thick and fresh, mingling with the distant murmur of a hidden stream weaving through the valley below. The mountain itself seemed to breathe in time with the traveller, its silence a living presence, both vast and intimate, holding space for stillness and movement alike. As he walked, the traveller noticed how the path curved and bent softly, sometimes revealing sudden vistas, a silver ribbon of river far below, clouds drifting lazily through the valleys, and shy alpine flowers blooming in delicate clusters beside the stones. Each scene was a quiet reminder of the vastness of the world, the mystery of the sky, and the smallness of his own restless worries. He paused beneath an ancient cedar tree, its roots twisted and gnarled like the fingers of time itself, clutching the earth with steady strength. Placing his hand against the rough bark, he felt the steady heartbeat of the tree beneath his palm, solid, enduring, and deeply rooted. This tree had stood here through countless seasons, storms and sunrises, snowfalls and springs, rooted yet flexible, firm yet yielding. In this moment, the traveller felt the mountain's quiet wisdom seep into him, that true strength is found not in resistance, but in gentle acceptance of life's inevitable currents. He resumed his journey, his steps now a quiet prayer, a meditation in motion. The path rose steeply at times, inviting effort and endurance, then flattened gently, allowing ease and rest. The traveller learned to move with the rhythm of the mountain, to embrace the challenge without hurry, to rest without guilt or haste. The air was filled with soft sounds, the distant call of a lone hawk, the rustle of wind through needles and leaves, the faint drip of melting snow from high crags. Each sound blended into a harmonious symphony of quiet presence. The traveller's breath deepened, slow and steady, in tune with the world around him. He noticed the texture of the path beneath his feet, the rough, crumbly earth mixed with smooth river stones warmed faintly by the rising sun. Sometimes his toes sank slightly into soft patches of moss, lush and cool as velvet. The scent of earth and pine filled his lungs with every inhale, grounding him more deeply in the moment. Along the way he found a cluster of delicate wildflowers, tiny, pale blossoms nodding gently in the breeze. Their fragile beauty seemed to speak softly of impermanence and grace, reminding him that even the smallest things hold profound meaning. Eventually he reached a small clearing bathed in golden sunlight. The warmth was gentle, spreading softly across his skin like a whispered caress. Here stood a smooth stone seat worn by the passage of countless travellers before him. He settled down quietly, folding his hands loosely in his lap and closing his eyes. The silence wrapped around him like a soft cloak, a sacred space where time seemed to slow and stretch. He breathed deeply, the pure mountain air filling his lungs like a balm for weary thoughts. As he sat, he felt the slow unfolding of peace within, a spaciousness growing like the first gentle light of dawn inside his chest. A question arose in the quiet, a soft, still inquiry as delicate as the rustle of pine needles. What if the path itself is the destination, and every single step you take is already enough? The traveller remained there, letting the mountain's quiet embrace hold him. Clouds drifted lazily overhead, their shapes shifting like slow-moving dreams. The sun warmed his face, the cool breeze whispered through the trees, and the world felt vast and tender, inviting him to rest fully into the present. Time seemed to lose meaning as he sat in that sacred stillness, feeling his heart slow, his mind soften, and a gentle clarity settle deep within. When at last he rose to continue, the mountain whispered a last blessing on the wind. May you walk your path with patience and presence, knowing that each step you take carries you gently home. As the traveller disappeared into the soft curves of the hillside, the question lingered softly in the air, an invitation meant for you, now resting here in this quiet moment. How might you walk your own path, embracing each step as a quiet gift?
And now, for the next story.
In a small garden behind a weathered house, there hung a wind chime made of 5 hollow bells. It was old, brass mostly, threaded with fading silk cords that swayed when the wind remembered them. Most days it was silent, still, asleep in the stillness of the air. But when the wind passed through, a soft breath, a sudden sigh, the bells would sing as though they'd been waiting to speak all along. A gentle, broken music, like water remembering how to fall. The woman who lived there was quiet too. She tended the moss with slow hands. She swept the stones without hurrying. And every morning before tea she would touch the wind chime gently and say, "Still here." That was all. Just that, as if reminding it and herself that presence did not always require motion. One day, as the woman sipped her tea, a small sparrow landed on the stone railing beside the wind chime. It tilted its head, hopped closer, then again, until it was perched on the thin wooden rod beneath the center bell. The wind did not stir, the chime did not ring, but the bird stayed. For minutes, for hours, watching the garden, watching the stillness, as if waiting for a kind of music that could not be heard with ears. The sparrow came again the next day, and the day after that, always at the same hour. Just after the woman's tea had cooled enough to sip in silence. She began to expect it, not with excitement, but with the calm welcome of a leaf greeting rain. The bird never chirped, never flapped, just landed softly and sat. sometimes on the railing, sometimes on the chime's base, once even atop the centre bell. It never made a sound, and neither did the wind, but the woman smiled. There was something in their quiet companionship that felt whole. Some afternoon she would sit beside the wind chime and the bird together, eyes closed, hands still. She didn't speak. She didn't need to, because in the hush between them there was a kind of conversation that only still things can share. One morning she left a few grains of millet on the stone ledge. The bird looked at them, but did not eat. It simply tilted its head again, watching her with one black eye, as if the offering had already been received the moment it was given. The wind remained still, the chimes untouched, and yet each day felt fuller than the one before. Not louder, not brighter, just deeper. The kind of depth that doesn't call attention to itself. Like the quiet in a teacup after the last sip. On the 7th day, the wind returned. It came gently, like an old friend stepping softly into a room it once knew well. The leaves stirred, the tea steam leaned, and the wind chimes swayed, just slightly. The sparrow was already there, perched as always, still as a thought not yet spoken. And then a single bell rang, software clear, lonely in the most beautiful way. The sparrow didn't fly, it remained still, eyes closed as if listening to something only the wind could sing. Then another bell. Then two together, a low harmony, unrehearsed, unfinished, perfect. The woman stood by the door, watching, hands folded, eyes soft. She did not cry, but something inside her did. Not sadness, not joy, something older than both. The sparrow tilted its head again, once, slowly, and took flight. Not fast, not far, just high enough to catch the breeze and ride it through the open air like a note returning to its source. The bells rang once more, all 5 this time, not loud, not long, just enough. Then silence. But not the old kind, not the kind that waits. This silence was full, like a bowl once filled, now emptied with grace. The woman bowed to the chime, then to the sky, then to the small space where the bird had always sat. She whispered, "Thank you for waiting." The sparrow did not return the next day, nor the one after that. The railing remained bare, the chime hung still, the wind had moved on. And yet the garden felt unchanged, no less alive, no less quiet. In fact, the quiet now carried a sound the woman had never heard before, not in her ears, but in her chest, in her breath, a kind of music left behind like footprints in morning dew. She still placed millet on the stone ledge, though it remained untouched. She still whispered, "Still here," each morning to the chime, her voice softer now, less out of habit, more out of reverence. One evening she sat in the garden as the sky turned to ink and stars began to poke through the dusk like lanterns. The wind chime moved, barely, a hush of metal on metal, no bird, no gust, just memory. And that too was enough. The woman closed her eyes, listened, and smiled, because she understood now that the bird had never needed to sing to be heard, and the wind had never needed to blow to be felt. Some things, the truest things, leave behind no mark, but they remain in stillness, in silence, in the spaces we once shared. And so the chime stayed, the wind returned when it wished. And sometimes, on quiet mornings, if you listened just right, you could hear the memory of feathers brushing softly against the rim of a bell, reminding you that not all goodbyes are departures. Some are simply echoes that choose to stay.
And now, for the next story.
It began on a morning draped in grey. The sky was low, heavy with clouds, and the rain fell not in sheets, but in a soft, endless hush, like the sound of someone breathing in their sleep. A young woman stood at the edge of a mountain trail, her cloak soaked, her boots thick with mud. She had set out days ago following a map drawn in ink and given to her by someone long gone. It had led her well, until now. Now the path was gone, wiped clean by the rain, no markings, no signs, just glistening stone and the rustle of wet leaves. She stood in the drizzle, confused, frustrated, and very tired. The mountains were quiet, no birds, no wind, only water, and something else. Something softer, a silence that seemed to watch her. She looked down at her feet, mud and moss, no trail. She looked ahead, mist. Then she looked inward and took a breath, not a deep one, just enough. Then, without the map, without the markers, she stepped forward. One step, then another, each footfall soft, unsure, and yet true. The path she had known was gone, but something new was beginning to form beneath the rain. The rain followed her, not angrily, not fiercely, but patiently, like an old friend with nothing left to prove. She walked, past trees that leaned as if listening, past stones slick with memory. Hours passed, or maybe just minutes. Time was different in the rain. Eventually she came upon a small house barely visible through the mist. A wooden gate, painted red long ago, stood slightly open, and behind it an old man knelt in the mud, tending to a single yellow flower. He looked up as she approached, but said nothing. She stood at the gate, rain dripping from her sleeves, and asked, "Is this the path to the monastery?" The man shook his head, then nodded, then shrugged. "Yes," he said finally, "and no. It depends on what you call the path." She frowned. "I mean the one drawn on the map." He smiled. "Ah, that one. It washed away last spring. The mountain took it back." The woman looked down, felt the ache in her legs, the damp in her bones. "Then I've gone the wrong way." "Not necessarily," the man said, patting the earth beside the flower. "Sometimes the right path is the one that appears only when you stop looking for it." She said nothing, only watched the flower, its petals wet, its colour somehow brighter in the rain. The man stood slowly, his knees cracking, "You can rest here," he said, "or keep walking. Either way, you'll arrive somewhere." She looked back the way she had come, then forward, then stepped through the gate, and sat. She stayed with the gardener for 2 days. They spoke little, shared warm rice, boiled tea over a small fire. The rain never stopped. Not once, but it softened, turned gentle, like a lullaby poured from clouds. On the 3rd morning she rose early. The garden glistened. Mist curled between branches, and in the damp earth, tiny green shoots reached up like shy questions. She stood at the gate, uncertain. The gardener came beside her. "You'll go today," he said, not as a question, but a noticing. She nodded. "But I still don't know the way." He bent down, brushed his hand across the mossy ground, and revealed a faint trail carved not by tools, but by time. "Paths appear when feet return," he said, "even when maps do not." She stared. It was there, just barely, a crease in the forest floor, worn smooth by travellers who never left marks. "It won't be straight," the man added, "and it won't look like a path from above." She smiled. "Nothing does." In the rain. With a small bow, she thanked him, then stepped onto the trail with quiet feet and an open heart. And as she walked, the rain did not hinder her. It held her, wrapped her in silence. And somehow, each time she lost the trail, a new one appeared. Not ahead, but beneath her, as if the mountain itself was guiding her one step at a time, not by certainty, but by presence. By dusk, the trail faded again. The forest grew thicker. The rain returned, heavier now, but still soft. Still kind. She stopped beneath an overhang of rock and moss, waited, listened, let the rain speak. She no longer wondered where she was. There was no map, no destination, only the sound of drops meeting stone and the slow, steady rhythm of her breath. Then, through the trees, a light, faint, warm, steady. She followed it, not quickly, not urgently, as if drawn by something older than direction. And there, in a hollow of the mountain, was a wooden temple, unmarked, unmapped, but undeniably meant. Its lanterns flickered with welcome. No gate, no name, just a space waiting to be entered. Inside, a single monk sat cross-legged by a fire. He looked up, smiled, and said, "You found it." She lowered her hood. Steam rose from her shoulders. "I wasn't looking anymore." He nodded. "That's why you arrived." She stepped inside, removed her boots, knelt. The monk poured tea into a simple clay cup. "This place isn't on any map," he said, "because it isn't a place. It's a moment." She sipped. The warmth spread through her hands, her chest, her quiet. And outside, the rain fell like a blessing, no longer washing things away, but revealing what had always been waiting beneath the noise.
And now, for the next story.
There was a village where autumn arrived like a whisper, not with thunder or storm or sudden frost, but with the gentle turning of leaves from green to flame. Every year, As the air grew cool and the shadows grew long, the trees lining the temple path began their slow transformation, and every year the villagers noticed one peculiar thing. Among all the leaves that drifted to the ground, some were painted. Not all, not most, just a few. One here, one there, delicate strokes of ink on a golden ginkgo, a faint splash of red on a pale maple. No one knew who painted them. They simply appeared, like little blessings left on the wind. Some believed it was the work of a spirit, others a wandering monk with too much time and too little talk. But those who rose before dawn and walked quietly sometimes caught a glimpse. A man seated beneath a tree with robes the colour of bark and hair touched with grey. He carried no scrolls, no canvas, only a thin brush, a bowl of ink, and the patience to wait for leaves to fall. He did not chase them, he did not pick them. He only painted the ones that landed at his feet, one at a time, one breath at a time. He was known by no name, but the villagers, in soft voices, called him the painter of falling leaves. One crisp morning, just after the first frost had kissed the edges of the rice fields, a young girl named Emmy stepped outside her home and found something resting on the stone step. A leaf, amber gold, soft as silk, with a single stroke of black ink. A crescent moon, quiet and delicate, drawn near the stem. She picked it up and felt something stir in her chest. Not fear, not joy, something quieter, curiosity wrapped in calm. She turned the leaf over, no writing, no signature. But when the wind passed through the trees, another leaf tumbled down, this one with a dot of crimson painted near its tip. Then another, and another, each one marked, each one gentle. The leaves seemed to form a path, not a trail on the ground, but a trail through the air. Emmy followed them, through the garden, past the shrine, down the winding steps that led to the forest's edge. She didn't rush, didn't call out, just walked and listened. The forest was not silent, but it was still. Birds shifted on branches, leaves whispered against one another, and somewhere ahead, a brush moved across a leaf with the softness of breath. As she rounded a bend in the path, she saw him, seated beneath a maple, old, still. His brush raised. He was not painting paper, only leaves, one by one as they fell into his lap from the boughs above. He looked up, briefly, met her eyes, and smiled. Not in surprise, not in welcome, but in recognition, as if he had been waiting for her to find him. Emmy sat down just a few paces from the painter. She didn't speak, didn't ask who he was or why he was painting leaves. She only watched. He dipped his brush into a shallow bowl of ink, held it steady in the air, and waited. A leaf drifted down, spinning slowly, until it landed near his knee. Only then did he move. With one gentle stroke he traced a spiral across its surface. A second leaf followed, a short line, then a dot. He worked as if listening, not creating, as if each mark was whispered to him by the leaf itself. Emmy looked at the small pile beside him, dozens of painted leaves, each one different. Some held shapes, others symbols. A few had nothing but a single line, so light it looked like breath. She finally spoke. "Why do you paint them?" she asked softly. The painter didn't look up, but he answered, "Because they fall." She waited, confused, and then he continued, "They fall only once. No two land the same way. No two turn in the same light. And so," he said, "each one is worth noticing." He handed her the next leaf that landed, unmarked, waiting, and the brush. She held it like she was holding stillness. "What should I draw?" she whispered. He smiled. "What you feel as it touches your hand." So she did. A small line, a circle, then nothing more. The leaf looked no different to the world, but to her it had become something else entirely. It had become seen. The sun dipped lower in the sky. Long shadows stretched across the forest floor, and the wind began to stir. The painter stood slowly, his movements calm, as if the years that bent his back had taught him to move like water, not resist it. He gathered the leaves into a cloth pouch, tied it with care, and placed it beside a stone marked only with moss. Then he bowed, to the tree, to the wind, to Emmy. "I won't be here next autumn," he said gently. Emmy looked up. She didn't ask why. Somehow she already knew. He handed her the brush, the same one he had used for all the seasons past. "They'll still fall," he said. "Someone should be there to listen to them." She nodded, though her throat was tight. And when she looked up again, he had already begun walking away, his steps vanishing into the rustling quiet of falling leaves. From that day forward, Emmy returned each autumn. She brought ink, a bowl, and the brush. She didn't try to paint them all, only the ones that landed gently in her open palm. She painted circles, lines, sometimes nothing at all, but with each leaf she listened, not to the wind, but to the silence beneath it, and the villagers noticed. Painted leaves began to appear again, in windowsills, on temple stones, tucked into books as quiet bookmarks of the season. They didn't know who left them, and no one asked, because some beauty they knew didn't need a name. It only needed to be received. And so the leaves kept falling, and someone, somewhere, kept remembering that each one only falls once.
And now, for the next story.
The tea house by the river. Along the gentle curve of a slow, winding river, where water lilies drifted lazily upon the surface and dragonflies traced delicate patterns in the air, there stood a humble tea house. Its wooden beams darkened and softened by countless seasons of sun, rain, and quiet storms, bore the gentle marks of time. The paper lanterns, hung like silent sentinels beneath the eaves, glowed softly at dusk, casting pools of amber light that danced gently against the fading sky. The tea house was tucked among willows and maples whose branches brushed the river's edge, their leaves whispering in the soft evening breeze. The air here was thick with the delicate fragrance of jasmine and the faint, calming trace of sandalwood incense that curled upward in slow, curling tendrils. Inside, the tatami mats were cool beneath bare feet, worn smooth by the footsteps of many who had come seeking quiet and solace. Sliding shoji doors framed views of the river's serene flow and moss-covered stones that stood like silent guardians along the banks. This place was tended by Hana, a quiet woman who moved with a calm and deliberate grace, as if each gesture was part of an ancient ritual. She prepared tea not just to serve a drink, but to offer a sanctuary, a moment of stillness in a world that often rushed by with clattering noise and fleeting moments. Her hands, slender and steady, worked with gentle precision, warming the teapot, selecting the finest leaves, pouring water heated to the perfect temperature, and watching as the fragrant steam rose in soft, ephemeral clouds. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind distant misted mountains and painted the sky with colours of rose and gold, a traveller arrived at the tea house. His journey had been long, filled with winding paths and restless nights when sleep seemed just out of reach. His eyes held the weariness of one who carries too many thoughts, like stones weighing heavy in a pocket. Drawn by the soft glow and quiet promise, he stepped inside the tea house, and the world outside seemed to fall away like a forgotten dream. Hana greeted him with a gentle bow, her smile warm yet reserved. She invited him to sit by the window where the river's slow current shimmered beneath the fading light. Here the outside world was softened to a gentle murmur, a perfect place to rest. As Hana prepared the tea, her movements slowed to a ritual rhythm. Water was poured carefully over the fragrant leaves, steam curling upward like a delicate veil rising from the earth. The soft clink of the teapot lid, the gentle swish of water stirring leaves, and the distant song of crickets blended into a lullaby that floated between moments, inviting the traveller to breathe deeper, to listen closer, to simply be. When the tea was ready, Hana offered the cup with both hands, eyes meeting his with a quiet invitation. This was not just tea, but a vessel of calm, a bridge to stillness. The traveller took the cup slowly, feeling the warmth seep into his palms, the rich aroma rising like a gentle tide to meet him. The first sip was soft and soothing, a balance of bitter and sweet, warm and comforting all at once. The warmth settled inside him, and a softness began to unfold, a gentle opening in the tight weave of tension and thought. He turned his gaze toward the river, watching as it curved slowly and steadily, flowing without hurry or struggle, embracing every stone and bend with grace. Hana's voice, soft as the evening breeze, broke the silence. "The river does not rush to reach the sea," she said. "It flows in its own time, carrying all things gently along. Like the river, your journey unfolds, not hurried, not forced, but patient and enough." The traveller closed his eyes, letting the warmth of the tea and the quiet rhythm of the river wash over him. He imagined himself as part of that gentle flow, carried by the current of time, softening against the stones of life's challenges. In the stillness, a question drifted like a leaf slowly floating downstream. What if peace is not found by chasing, but by allowing yourself to flow? The night deepened around the tea house, stars appearing one by one like distant lanterns suspended in the vast sky above. The paper lanterns flickered gently, their light a small, steady beacon in the calm darkness. The air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of damp earth and blooming night flowers. The traveller sat a while longer, wrapped in quietude, feeling the gentle pulse of the river's timeless rhythm echo within him. When it was time to leave, Hana's words lingered softly like a whispered blessing. "May your journey be like the river, steady, patient, and guided by the light within." As he stepped back onto the path by the riverbank, the traveller carried with him not just the memory of tea and warmth, but a quiet question to rest upon his heart. How might your own journey flow if you trust its slow and steady course?
for the next story.
There was a grove, hidden at the edge of the mountain, not marked on any map, not spoken of by name. The villagers called it the place where the wind forgets itself, because when you stepped into it, everything changed. The world grew quiet, time slowed, and the sound disappeared. Not completely, but almost. It wasn't empty like a cave or muffled like snow. It was something deeper, as if the bamboo with its tall, slender stalks had swallowed sound whole and was now holding its breath. Travellers who wandered there spoke of a strange feeling, that the silence was listening. The monks nearby avoided the grove, not from fear, but from reverence. Only one man visited it regularly, an old caretaker, thin, sun-wrinkled, with a beard like moss and steps that made no noise. He didn't speak much, didn't carry tools, just a straw broom and a small wooden bowl for tea and rainwater. Each morning, just after the sun crested the ridge, he entered the bamboo grove and swept. No path, no destination, just slow, patient strokes through fallen leaves, shadows and yesterday's thoughts. He never seemed to be cleaning anything, only listening. One late spring morning, as mist curled along the forest floor, a young boy appeared at the edge of the grove. He had wandered for hours, barefoot, lost, his face streaked with dirt and wonder. He didn't speak, only watched. The old caretaker noticed him, but said nothing, just swept another slow line through the soft dust beneath the stalks. The boy sat down, cross-legged, still, and listened. He expected to hear birds or insects or the whisper of leaves overhead, but there was nothing, only silence, and not the silence of sleep or fear or absence. This silence felt full, alive, like something was there, just beyond the hearing. "Why is it so quiet here?" the boy finally asked. The caretaker looked up, but didn't answer. Instead, he held out the broom. The boy hesitated, then took it. He stood, gripped it with both hands, and began to sweep. It felt strange at first, pointless, but as the minutes passed, he began to notice something. The way the dust moved in little spirals, the way each stroke of the broom matched the rhythm of his breathing, the way the silence didn't grow heavier. It grew deeper, not empty, but vast, like a space where sound was waiting to be understood. Days passed. The boy returned each morning, always barefoot, always silent. He never asked questions again. Instead, he swept, slowly, deliberately, sometimes in lines, sometimes in circles, sometimes with no pattern at all. And always, the silence greeted him. It no longer felt strange. It felt like a friend that waited without rushing. One morning, as he swept near the center of the grove, his broom caught on something. He stopped, knelt, brushed away the dust with his hands. There, half buried beneath layers of fallen leaves, was a small wooden disc, old, weathered, smoothed by years of wind and rain. He lifted it, turned it over, a faint symbol carved into its surface, a single ripple, like water disturbed by a single drop. The old man, watching from a distance, stepped forward, He took the disc gently, held it to his ear, and closed his eyes, then handed it back to the boy. "Place it against the earth," he whispered. The boy did, and as he pressed it to the mossy floor beneath the bamboo, he heard it, a sound, but not from the disc, from beneath it, from beneath the earth, low, software endless, like a song sung 1,000 years ago, still echoing just below the roots. It wasn't music, not exactly. It was memory, the memory of wind and rain and all the things that had passed through the grove, without speaking. He looked up at the old man. "It's still here," he said quietly. The caretaker nodded. "Everything leaves a sound, even silence. You just have to know where to listen." That evening, the boy and the old man sat together in silence. No words, no tea, only the deep hum beneath the earth still echoing inside them both. The moon rose slowly through the bamboo stalks, casting silver lines across the forest floor, and the grove, quiet as always, felt fuller somehow, richer, as if the earth itself was exhaling. In the days that followed, the boy kept sweeping, but now his sweeping was different. He no longer swept to find or to understand. He swept to listen. Each stroke of the broom became a soft bow, a way of saying, "I'm here, I'm listening, I remember." And the grove listened back. The old caretaker grew slower, his steps less steady, his eyes more distant, like someone already halfway into the next world. Then, one morning, he didn't come. But the boy did. He arrived with the rising sun, barefoot as always, carrying the old broom, now worn smooth by years of silent practice. He bowed before entering, then stepped into the bamboo grove as if stepping into a sacred breath, and swept. The sound beneath the bamboo remained, low, patient, endless. Some say he still sweeps there now, though he is no longer a boy. Some say the grove has grown quieter still, and yet fuller than ever. And if you sit there long enough, you may hear it too. Not with your ears, but with something softer, a sound that doesn't ask to be heard, but waits to be remembered.
And now, for the next story.
Along a narrow forest path hidden by roots and quiet moss, there sat a rock. It wasn't large, nor polished. It didn't mark anything. It didn't move. It simply rested half buried in soil as the wind passed over it, again and again. Travellers rarely noticed. Those who did never looked twice. And yet, the rock was not always the same. Each spring, as the snow melted, new droplets would carve tiny veins across its surface. In summer, sunlight warmed its face until small lichens bloomed like ancient script etched in green. Autumn brought leaves that nestled against it. Some stayed, slowly melting into the soil. And winter wrapped it in stillness so complete, even time itself seemed to pause beside it. The rock never spoke, never stirred, but it turned, not quickly, not even once a year, just a slow, imperceptible shift, so faint it could not be seen, only sensed, like a breath between moments, Some said it was the wind, others blamed the rain or the roots that grew underneath. But the truth was simpler. The rock listened to the seasons, to the footsteps, to the silence between bird calls, and with each turning it learned something, not in words, but in weight, in patience, in how to remain and still be moved. There was a small monastery nearby, stone walls, sloped roofs, wind chimes that sang only when the mountain breeze remembered them. A young monk lived there, quiet, curious, still learning the rhythm of walking without hurry. Each morning after sweeping the temple steps, he would walk the path that curved through the forest. He never had a destination, only a direction, and one day he saw the rock. He paused, not because it looked important, but because it looked still, perfectly still. He sat across from it, cross-legged, hands folded, and simply watched. The rock did nothing, said nothing, but something about its silence made the monk want to stay. So he did. Every morning, every season, he sat. And as the years unfolded like petals, the monk noticed things. The way moss crept along the base, the way frost melted first on one side, the way the rock seemed to shift just slightly toward the east. He never touched it, never tried to move it. He simply returned, again and again, until the path itself knew his footsteps and the birds stopped flying away when he approached. Sometimes he would whisper to the stone, "Still here," and though the rock never replied, the monk always left feeling, heard. It became his ritual, more sacred than prayer, a silence more eloquent than any scripture. Years passed. The monk's hair turned silver, his steps slower, but still, each morning, he walked the path. He no longer swept the temple steps. Others did that now. But the rock, that was still his, or rather, he was still its. One autumn morning he arrived later than usual. His breath came in soft clouds. His knees creaked as he lowered himself to sit. The rock, of course, was waiting. But something had changed. A line, once hidden along the base, was now clearly visible. A crack. No, a marking. A natural fold now turned just enough to catch the light. He hadn't noticed it before, but now it felt deliberate, as if the rock had finally revealed something it had been keeping for decades. The monk smiled, not with his mouth, but with his whole body. He whispered, "You've turned," and the forest, just for a breath, felt warmer. He placed his palm flat on the earth next to the rock, not touching, just close, then closed his eyes. And for a moment, the space between them, man and stone, was so still, even the wind held its breath, because this, he understood now, was the way things speak when they are truly listening. Not in words, not in signs, but in presence, in slow change, in the trust that comes from staying. That day he sat longer than usual, not because he had to, but because he didn't want to leave. That winter was long, the snow deep, the wind often too strong for walking. The monk visited less, but he never forgot. He sat by the temple window, facing the forest, eyes closed, heart listening. And when spring returned, soft and pale, he made the journey one last time. The path was overgrown, moss thick, branches lower than before. But the rock was there, turned just slightly more, its shape unfamiliar in a familiar way, like meeting an old friend with a new smile. The monk sat, though his knees ached, though his hands trembled. He brought with him a small wooden tag etched with a single word: listen. He placed it gently beside the rock, tucked beneath a fern where wind and time could do what they pleased. Then he bowed deep and long and turned to go. He did not look back, but the forest did. It watched his slow steps until they disappeared between the trunks. Then all was still again, and the rock, which had turned through decades without witness, now waited once more, until one summer a child wandered along the path. He stopped, looked, saw the stone, and something beneath the fern, a word faded but clear: listen. He knelt, didn't touch, just sat, and in that moment the rock moved, not far, not fast, just enough to begin again.
And now for the next story.
In a village wrapped in mist and maple leaves there stood an old bell tower, tall and weathered. It had no bells, only silence. The villagers said the tower was empty, except for a fox who slept there. No one knew where the fox had come from. Some said it was a spirit, others a guardian. Every evening as the sun dipped low, the fox would climb the narrow stairs and curl into a quiet circle beneath the empty bell. It never howled, it never stirred, only slept, as if keeping watch over the villagers' dreams. One morning, a young boy named Kaito decided to visit the tower. He had heard the stories and wanted to see if the fox was real. He climbed the stairs carefully, heart steady and soft with wonder. At the top, he found the fox, fur glowing faintly in the morning light, eyes closed, breathing slow and even. The fox seemed a stillness made flesh, a living breath of calm, as if the silence itself had chosen this form. Kaito did not speak. He simply sat beside the fox, feeling the quiet wrap around them both. The morning light filtered through the tower's wooden slats, casting gentle shadows that danced across the floor, and the air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, a reminder of the stillness held in nature's heart. The fox opened one eye, looked at him, then closed it again. No fear, no haste, just presence. Kaito stayed for a long time, listening, waiting, and in that stillness he felt the tower itself breathing with life, as if the ancient wood held memories of countless nights, and the dreams whispered beneath its watch. Days passed, and Kaito returned often to the bell tower. Each time he found the fox curled beneath the empty bell, quiet, still, yet somehow full of unseen energy. One afternoon, as golden light spilled through the slats, Kaito sat cross-legged and asked softly, "Why do you sleep here when the village is so far below?" The fox opened its eyes slowly, and for a moment, Kaito thought it might speak. but it only blinked, then nudged a small stone toward him. Kaito picked it up, smooth, warm and heavy in his palm. He looked at the fox, waiting for more. The fox rose, stretched with the grace of the wind, and moved to the edge of the tower. There it paused, looking out over the village below, roofs glowing softly in the fading light. It turned back to Kaito, and in its eyes he saw a story, not told with words, but felt deeply. The fox seemed to say, "I watch while you dream. I rest so you may rest. I carry the quiet between your thoughts." Kaito nodded, understanding without understanding. He stayed until the stars appeared, then climbed down slowly, carrying the stone, and the silence with him. Over time, the villagers noticed a change. The nights felt softer, dreams came easier, and when the wind brushed the rooftops, it sounded like a whisper, a fox's lullaby from the tower above. Kaito knew the secret now. The fox was not just a creature. It was a guardian of peace, of sleep, and of the fragile threads that hold the village together. One evening, Kaito gathered the children of the village near the base of the bell tower. He told them the story, not in words, but in silence. He showed them the smooth stone the fox had left warm in his hand. "This is a piece of the quiet," he said softly, "carried from the tower where the fox sleeps and watches." The children listened with wide eyes, breathing in the stillness that seemed to ripple from the tower itself. Kaito taught them to sit quietly, to close their eyes and to imagine the fox's soft breath moving through the village, a lullaby woven into the night air. The villagers began to join in. At dusk, they would gather under the tower, holding stones like Kaito's, and share moments of silence. The air grew lighter, tensions softened, even the busiest workers paused to breathe and listen. The fox watched, still sleeping, still guarding, as peace grew in the hearts of those below. One night, Kaito climbed the tower once more. The fox was there, its eyes open now, reflecting the stars. It stepped forward, nudged the stone in Kaito's hand, and then curled once more, ready to rest, ready to watch. Kaito smiled, feeling the gentle weight of quiet settling deep inside. He knew the fox's gift was not just for sleep. It was a gift of presence, of stillness, of the soft spaces between thought and dream. Seasons passed, the village changed, as all things do. But the bell tower remained, and so did the fox. It became more than a guardian, more than a watcher. It became a symbol of peace, of calm, of care. Villagers would speak softly of the fox, tell stories to their children, not just of magic but of quiet presence. At times, when the world felt too loud, they would climb the tower steps and sit in silence, feeling the weight of stillness settle around them. The fox slept, but never truly rested. Its watch was gentle, unceasing, woven through the dreams of every home below. And Kaito, now grown, a keeper of stories himself, would visit often. He would place a smooth stone at the base of the tower, a token of gratitude and remembrance. And when the wind brushed the leaves, it carried a whisper, not of fear, not of hurry, but of rest, of safety, of the quiet heart that watches over us when we sleep. And so the bell tower stood, a silent guardian in the mist, holding space for peace, and the fox who slept within.
And now for the next story.
High above the village, where the mist moved like breath over pine-covered hills, there stood a temple, old, silent, weathered by time, but not forgotten. Its walls leaned slightly with age, the wood creaked in the wind, and the roofs, curved like the wings of resting birds, collected the morning rain like open palms. Inside the temple's highest chamber hung a great bronze bell. It was said to be perfectly cast, tall as a man, smooth as river stone, etched with poems no one could quite read. But what made it truly special was not its beauty. It was this. The bell had never been struck. Not once. Not by monk nor wind nor wandering child. It had hung there for over 100 years, suspended in stillness, its voice a mystery. People in the village whispered stories about it. Some said it was cursed. Others believed it held a sound so powerful the monks dared not release it. One elder claimed that if the bell ever rang, it would awaken a slumbering mountain god. Another said the sound would echo forever. Once heard, it would never leave your ears. But the truth was simpler. Long ago, a master had built the bell, not to be rung, but to be listened to, not with ears, but with presence. Sound, he had said, is not born from striking. It is born from silence, and silence must be heard before it can be broken. So the monks left it untouched, and generations passed, and the bell remained perfectly still, until one rainy season a young novice arrived at the temple, quiet, curious, carrying more questions than robes. He swept the floors, boiled the tea, chanted in the cold mornings, carried firewood, listened to the wind. But each day he found himself returning to the high chamber, to the bell, to the silence around it. He couldn't stop wondering, what would it sound like? The novice stood before the bell each morning. He never touched it, only looked, listened. Some days he thought he could hear something, a low hum just beneath the silence. Other days, nothing at all. The chamber itself seemed alive, not with movement, but with waiting. There was a sense that something lingered in the still air, just beyond the senses, a presence too quiet to name. One evening he approached the old abbot as they shared tea in the candlelight. "Master," he asked softly, "why has the bell never been rung?" The abbot smiled, did not answer right away. Instead he poured the tea, watched the steam curl into the air, then said, "Some things were not made to make noise. Some were made to teach us how to listen." The novice frowned. But how can we know its voice if we never let it speak? The abbot looked toward the window. Rain tapped against the wood. "If you wish to hear the bell," he said, "sit with it, breathe with it, let it reveal itself." And that was all. The next day the novice climbed the steps before sunrise. He sat cross-legged before the bell, eyes open, hands folded, and he listened. Not for ringing, not for thunder. He listened for stillness, for breath, for the quiet curve of metal hanging in space. Day after day, he returned. He watched how the light shifted across the surface of the bell, how the dust gathered in the corners, how his own breathing grew quieter over time. The villagers thought him foolish. "It's just a bell," they said, "a pretty thing with no voice." But the novice knew, the longer he listened, the quieter the world became, and the quieter the world became. The more he heard, not with his ears, but somewhere deeper, a resonance, like wind across water, like time itself pausing to breathe, a feeling of being in the presence of something very old and very awake. One morning, after a long night of rain, the novice climbed once again to the chamber of the bell. But something felt different. The air was clearer, the floor still damp, and light moved in long, golden strands through the misted windows. He sat, crossed his legs, closed his eyes, and waited. He did not try to hear the bell. He simply listened to the wind, to the shifting silence, to the feeling of being alive and not needing more than that. And then, without warning, it happened. A tone, faint, round, like the memory of a sound you've never heard, but always known. It rang not from the bell, but from within him. A fullness, a warmth, a stillness that pulsed like light behind closed eyes. He opened them. The bell had not moved. It hung there, unstruck, unchanged. And yet, he had heard it, clearer than any chime, truer than any gong. The novice bowed his head and wept, not out of sorrow, but out of recognition, because he understood now. The bell did not need to be struck to speak. Its silence was its song, its stillness was its teaching, and those who waited for noise would never hear it. That evening he returned to the abbot. They sat together in quiet. The novice did not speak of the sound. He did not need to. The abbot looked at him, smiled, and said, "You've heard it then?" The novice nodded. The candle between them flickered, the tea steamed, and outside, far above the village, a bell that had never been struck continued to ring in the hearts of those who knew how to listen.
And now, for the next story.
The quiet tea house. Nestled deep within a misty valley, where soft clouds drift lazily among rolling hills carpeted with emerald moss and wildflowers, there stands a tea house unlike any other. It is small and unassuming, its wooden beams weathered and worn smooth by the gentle hands of time, its paper windows glowing faintly with the warm light of countless quiet evenings spent in thoughtful stillness. Here the world slows its hurried breath, and every moment becomes a gentle invitation to pause, to breathe deeply, and to taste the subtle sweetness of true stillness. The tea house rests quietly beside a slow, winding river whose waters move like liquid glass over smooth stones, mirroring the delicate dance of cherry blossoms drifting lazily on its surface. Each dawn the mist rises like a silken curtain, wrapping the valley in a soft hush that seems to hold the whispered secrets of the earth itself. The faint, earthy scent of damp soil mingles with the sweet fragrance of blooming jasmine and the fresh green of spring leaves, filling the air with a quiet invitation to surrender to the present. One spring morning, as the world stirred gently awake beneath a pale sky brushed with strokes of rose and gold, a traveller named May found herself walking softly along the moss-covered path that led to this sanctuary. Her footsteps were light, careful not to disturb the tender stillness that embraced the land. She was drawn here not by fame or fortune, but by a quiet yearning, a desire to find a place untouched by haste, where the simple act of drinking tea might become a meditation, a sacred art of being fully present in the moment. As May crossed the threshold and stepped inside, a warm, inviting scent of roasted tea leaves and freshly steamed water wrapped around her like a comforting shawl. The room was simple and serene. Tatami mats woven finely beneath her feet, a low wooden table polished to a soft sheen by the hands of generations, and shelves lined with delicate porcelain cups and teapots shaped by artisans who understood the delicate harmony of form, function, and beauty. She settled herself quietly onto the mat, the soft rustle of her kimono blending harmoniously with the gentle crackle of the hearth's fire. Across from her, the tea master, a graceful elderly woman whose eyes reflected the calm stillness of a mountain lake, moved with a slow, deliberate grace. Each movement was a quiet poem of mindfulness, the gentle clink of the kettle as it was lifted, the precise pouring of steaming water over fragrant leaves, the curl of rising steam like a silent prayer dissolving into the still air. May watched, captivated as the ritual unfolded. She felt her breath lengthen and deepen, her mind softening like the petals of a flower opening to the morning sun. When the tea master finally placed the small cup before her, warm and fragrant in her hands, May lifted it slowly to her lips. The flavour was subtle and profound, a delicate bitterness softened by a whisper of sweetness, unfolding slowly, like a secret whispered only to those who truly listen. As May sipped, the world outside the tea house faded into a distant hum, a soft backdrop to the deepening silence within. The worries and restless thoughts that had clung to her like shadows began to dissolve, slipping away like petals carried gently downstream. Time stretched and softened, each moment flowing seamlessly into the next, a continuous thread of calm, clarity, and gentle presence. The tea master's voice broke the silence at last, soft and tender like a breeze through bamboo leaves. In tea there is stillness. In stillness there is truth. And in truth the heart finds its way home. May closed her eyes and breathed deeply, letting the warmth of the tea seep deep into her being, mingling with the slow rhythm of her breath. She felt the pulse of the earth beneath the tea house, the steady heartbeat of soil, water and stone, and the slow, timeless flow of the river nearby. She felt the soft weight of time's passing, neither hurried nor stagnant, but a gentle unfolding, like a flower blooming in the sun. As the afternoon light softened and the sky blushed with the first hues of twilight, May remained seated in quiet contemplation, carrying the tea's tender wisdom as a flame nestled softly in her heart. Outside, the river's gentle murmur mingled with the distant song of crickets and the rustling of leaves in the evening breeze, weaving a lullaby of peace that reached deep into the soul. She wondered softly, what moments of stillness can you find in your own day? Where can your heart come home to peace? The tea house waited quietly for her answer, a gentle presence beyond words, a sanctuary held safe within the flow of time and breath.
And now, the stories have ended, but your journey does not. If you're still awake, let yourself float a little longer. If you're already asleep, May your dreams be calm and clear. Thank you for resting with us here at Zen Mind Journey. We'll be here again tomorrow night. Until then, may peace be your pillow and silence your friend.